Welcome to The Details with Elliott, Connie, and Adam Frower. This is a podcast where we examine the intersection between solution-focused brief therapy and current topics going on in the world. And we do this because we genuinely want the world to be a better place. So enjoy and come examine the details with us.
Adam, I don't know if you noticed it, because I know the sports world typically functions outside your field of vision or care even, but something happened this past week that I thought was one of the most courageous things I had ever seen. And to be honest with you, I probably should have seen it coming. But let me catch you up, Adam, for you and any listener who, like, sports isn't on their forefront of their mind. They might not be aware of it. So now my phone, I have ESPN, which is one of the largest like sports networker news kind of things, all dedicated to sports companies in the world. And I have ESPN, it gives me notifications on my phone. And about a week ago, a tennis player, a very good tennis player, her name is Naomi Osaka. She's the number 2 ranked tennis player in the world. And she's one of these like young ones who's like coming on the scene and winning tournaments and making a lot of noise in the past few years. She's Black and or brown. She's born in Japan. She's also in pop culture a little bit. And I saw Naomi Osaka will not be talking to the press at the French Open. And the French Open is one of the 4 major tennis tournaments in the world. Those 4 tournaments are called the Grand Slams. And the tennis players try to win these 4 tournaments more than any other tournament. She's going to go to this tournament, which I believe she's won before. I don't actually know, but I think she's won that one before. And she says, this year I'm going to go and I'm not going to speak to the press. Now, I saw that and I thought like maybe something controversial has happened, or maybe the press weren't kind to her. And she was like, I'm not going to speak to the press because you guys have been mean. And I didn't think too much of it, right? I saw that thing. I just assumed perhaps in her, I've got a hip hop boyfriend, and she had received negative press about something and decided she wasn't going to talk to the press. And then this weekend, it all came to a head, and it turns out it was one of the most courageous things that I've heard. And it relates to taking care of yourself and taking care of your health and taking care of your mental health. These days, I don't really make a distinction between mental health and health. And I didn't know this because why would I? It's 100% none of my business, none of anybody's business. But Naomi Osaka struggles with anxiety and depression and has for many years. And she talked about how speaking to the press is very, very hard for her. And she talked about how showing up to these tournaments in front of the whole world is very, very hard for her. And she's having a tough time recently. So she had decided not to speak to the press because it was triggering her anxiety and depression, not because of the way the press treated her in any shape, but just the activity of speaking to the world was too much. And she decided, I'm not going to do it, which I think is an incredibly courageous choice. This weekend, when she skipped a press event, she was fined $15,000 and threatened with being kicked out of the tournament. So she left the tournament. She chose to leave the tournament on her own and go take care of herself. And she wrote a really like clear letter that she released publicly. And I just thought, I had a couple of thoughts about it. First thought I had was, like, Adam, I have a bit of notoriety. I have a bit of fame. I have a bit of celebrity status. And when I say a bit, like I emphasize a bit, like I don't in any way consider myself like on those levels. But you've heard me say, Adam, I don't know how like celebrities live their lives, given what I experienced with my little bit of fame as a result of doing therapy and writing therapy books and giving lectures. She's the number 2 ranked tennis player in the world. I have no idea how these people live their lives. I'm very introverted and I have a really hard time sometimes. I've actually hired people, I have people on my staff. Their job is to help kind of like damp the noise that comes in through my inbox and my social media accounts and things like that. I can't imagine the level of noise that these people have to deal with. It's just interesting. It's fascinating that she had the strength to walk away from the tournament. And I've also struggled with depression. I've also struggled with negative things. I've also had really dark times. If somebody asked me during one of my really dark times, will you come give a keynote at this event? I'm capable of doing it because I would be laser focused on my task. I know I'm good at it. I know I can do it. I'd be laser focused on that task and I could go do it. If they told me before you take the stage and deliver your keynote, you have to attend a press conference and let a throng of media ask you questions for half an hour, it would be really hard for me during those really dark times. And I don't know if I have the courage to just be like, I'm leaving the event. And I just am in awe and in admiration of this young woman. But it makes me want to highlight the importance of courage and the example of courage we just saw take place.
It's really powerful. I think you're right. I think courage is such a great word that kind of encapsulates what she did. As I think about courage, there's kind of two parts to courage that I think come into play here. And one is courage basically requires you to do something or to act when you're nervous or scared or frightened, right? So there's something that's telling you don't do that, and you're able to overcome and do it anyway. And on so many fronts for Naomi, right, that culture of tennis and professional athletes is you talk to the press. It would be frightening to kind of take on that cultural norm and to say, I'm not going to follow this cultural norm. I'm going to do something different than what's expected of me. And like you alluded to, right, she got fined for taking that step. And then once she got fined, she didn't just stop there, but then even went a step further to say, I'll do something even more challenging, which is then to remove myself. I would rather take care of myself than to participate in a tournament that I could probably do very well and possibly even win. And so I think overcoming fear, overcoming doubt, those kinds of things, there's something really powerful in that. And I think then that second component is this idea of strength. It's oftentimes easy to look at someone who's doing something outside of their comfort zone, right? In this case, she's taking care of herself mentally and emotionally, and to look at that as weakness and to say she's a weak person because she's not able to take care of her mental health or hold her mental health together in such a way that she can do these things that are expected of her. But I think it takes such great strength to say, I'm going to take care of myself despite criticism. I'm going to do something even though people may view it as weakness. And so I think the line here, as in many cases, the line becomes really blurry between strength and weakness. And I think what tips it into, at least for me, what tips it into strength is Naomi must know herself so well, and to say, continuing to engage in this process when I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling, when I'm dealing with the things that I'm dealing with, that will do me more harm than the criticism that may come as a result of me taking this really important step. And so I think as we consider courage, we kind of need to consider that it's a huge sign of strength that many people may not see, and we need to see it as overcoming something, doing something in the face of fear or challenge or difficulty. And I think she epitomizes both of those things of doing something courageous when many other people wouldn't or couldn't do that.
No, and Adam, you talked about something like self-awareness. She's 23.
Mm.
Were you this self-aware at 23? I certainly was not. And were you confident and courageous enough to take such a bold step in front of the entire world? There's no way. I'm not sure I can do it now. I'm 44. It's just incredible. So interestingly enough, I got interviewed today by a graduate student. They had a project in school and they interviewed me about what my practicum experience was like. Like they're in practicum in graduate school, and their project was find an alum of this program and then interview them with these series of questions. And one of the questions that I was asked was, what's one thing you wish you knew before you started practicum? And I said that I wish I knew that I needed the courage to make mistakes. This person was like, really? Like, I think they expected me to say, like, you can do it and, know your theory and, that kind of stuff. But I was like, you have to be courageous enough to make mistakes in order to become successful as a psychotherapist. In the same way, you'd have to be courageous enough to make mistakes in order to become really talented at anything. And I don't think we talk about mistake making enough in our field. So I was actually thinking about courage as a consequence of this interview. And then digging deeper into this, Naomi Osaka, like this person, like I said, she was ranked number 2 in the world. She has been ranked number 1 in the world. This person is world class at what she does. And among the best to do it ever. Like, not a whole lot of women in the history of the world have ever been ranked number 1. And she is one of them. And to have to walk away from that because you need to take care of yourself and your depression and your anxiety because you're being asked to do things that trigger it. I'm in awe of that level of courage. And all of us in our walks through life need to demonstrate courage. We all need to have the ability to be courageous enough to be ourselves, to take care of ourselves, and go on a journey to discover ourselves. I think all of those things require courage.
What you just said, I think, is really valuable and important. And taking time to discover yourself, taking time to take care of yourself, those kinds of things. It also brings to my mind that we also have a really important obligation to point out that this is also LGBTQ Awareness Month and Pride Month, right? And you think about this topic as it relates to that population, right? And courage. There aren't many groups of people who have had to demonstrate as much courage as that community has had to demonstrate. You think about, even in what you just said, right, of being self-aware, being able to kind of examine who you are and what you stand for. When that population is kind of self-aware and self-discovering, it comes in contradiction to stereotypes, to cultural norms. And so even the courage to say, this is who I am, this is how I feel, this is how I want to act, it takes such an immense amount of courage to not only just become aware of that on your own and to accept yourself for who you are individually, but then to go the next step, which many people then take, right? Which is to then put out to a world which may and often does push back and say that isn't who you are, or you shouldn't be acting that way, or you shouldn't feel that way. And just the ongoing amount of courage that it has to take daily, probably for many people, to embrace themselves, to let the community know that they're different than what we culturally accept as the traditional norm. I just look at the people that you and I know who over years have become not only courageous to accept themselves, but then courageous enough to advocate for themselves, but also to advocate for others, to make a place that's welcoming to people. And this month, I think, commemorates the courage of an entire community that is really just amazing and astounding, really.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to make one final point about it. Connecting the two things, like what happened this weekend and the fact that it's Pride Month. Also, that we're psychotherapists and the importance of courage as a psychotherapist is, I think the most courageous thing you can do is discover yourself. And the second most courageous thing you can do is be yourself. And interestingly, one of the best ways to produce consistent positive outcomes in the field of psychotherapy is to connect with your client. And the most consistent way to be connectable with your client is to be authentic, which means you have to do those two courageous things. You got to discover who you are so that you can be who you are. And only then are you available to be connected to other people. And for that reason, I think courage is a lesson that all of us should learn and discover in our lives, because it yields benefit in our personal lives, but it also yields benefits in our professional lives too.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think so many times we as psychotherapists hide behind techniques or
Right.
theory or philosophy, And I think it creates such a convenient barrier. If clients aren't helped, if clients don't feel like they're getting better, it's easy to say, well, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they're living in denial, or they're whatever, and to shift the blame onto the client. And I think one of the things that's so important is that we as clinicians do exactly what you said. We have to know ourselves, and then we have to act consistent to what we know about ourselves. This comes up so often in when we teach with one another, that you oftentimes are rapid fire questions, right? Just like flows super fast. And I, on the other hand, am slow and deliberate and really conscientious about specific words and those kinds of things. And oftentimes people say, how can you do it so differently? And I think really what it comes down to is, and we've talked about this overtly, is we're both completely okay with being who we are. And I'm not going to change who I am to try to be the kind of clinician you are, and you're not going to change who you are in order to become the kind of clinician that I am. I think that really serves our clients well. That if I tried to be you or you tried to be me, we would flounder and our clients would be not helped one bit. And so I think you're right. I think being a good clinician means you have to be courageous enough to take who you are outside of the room and bring that person into the room and say, this person is good enough to be a therapist.
Like, we get asked about our different styles of therapy, but we actually get asked about our relationship even more. Like, people ask us a lot about, like, because what you didn't say is while you're doing your slow and deliberate therapy, you're often wearing a collared button down shirt. And while I'm doing my rapid fire therapy, I'm often wearing like a Nike sweatshirt with unlaced shoes that completely match the Nike sweatshirt. And you're often in your button down shirt and, you know, cotton Dockers, or, you know, and the reason why we're both effective at what we do is because we're so comfortable being who we are. And we've been through the journey to discover who we are. And we've made the decision that we're going to be who we are. And like I said, you connect well with people who are being authentic. You know, I'm sure wherever Naomi Osaka is right now, I'm sure that she is struggling, or she wouldn't have made that decision. I'm sure she struggled with that decision, but I hope she knows that she set an example and the world saw it. And I hope she knows that there are a lot of people that support and appreciate her, but she set a wonderful global example of what courage and strength looks like, and it's one that we can all learn from.
I think the final point that I would make is, as much as you and I are comfortable being who we are, I think there's a huge balance that kind of strikes at the very center of courage. And I think it is being comfortable with who you are while being willing to change to become the very best of who you can be.
True.
I think it takes an immense amount of courage to say, I'm going to examine my beliefs. I'm going to reevaluate what I think and what I believe. And then I'm going to change. I'm going to become better. I'm going to be the best version of me. And I think that's one of the words that we use all the time in solution-focused therapy is the best version of you.
Right.
And I think we got a glimpse this week of Naomi Osaka and a version of her, a very courageous version of her, and a version that instead of being, in essence, near perfect, we got to see a less than perfect version of Naomi, which I might argue is actually then a more perfect version, right? That
Absolutely.
When we get to see the vulnerable, when we get to see the person who struggles, then we get to see the real version of her. And what a courageous thing she did to show us a different version of who she is.
Yeah, perhaps tennis is not her great gift. Perhaps it's courage. Anyway, all right, Adam. Look, hey, we have sponsors. So this episode of The Details has been brought to you by the Solution Focused Universe, which is the largest online training community dedicated to solution-focused brief therapy, and Solution Focused Notes, which is the only electronic health records dedicated to and built by solution-focused professionals. So I want to thank those two organizations for sponsoring our podcast, and thank everybody out there for listening to our podcast. And we will see you in the next episode of The Details.